Welcome to Office Hours. I am Steve Drost. With me, as always, Will Kaplan. Of course, Will and I are both from the Quivr team. And what is Quivr? Simple. We are the CRM built by financial advisors for financial advisors, and our objective is crystal clear. We are here to help you run your business at peak efficiency. In each episode, we tackle a couple of cool items that came directly from our users who are trying to do just that, make their lives a little bit easier. Will, me and you have both worked at small firms, right? I was a solo for a while, a year maybe, a true solo. You were a solo for longer than that. Before that, I was at a big firm at 30-ish people. You were at a much bigger firm, closer to 100 people. And I would say no matter what size firm we're in, what role we're in, one of the biggest issues that I have faced is completing work that requires a specific data set. I need to do something, but in order to do something, I need to know certain things, right? From processing a QCD to opening a new account, to onboarding a client, to a new IPS, to executing trades, to sending money, to sending a wire, to sending an ACH, doing an ACAT transfer, right? All of these things. I promise I didn't have that written down. That was off the top of my head. Every single thing that we need to do, we need a data set. And when we need to have a process to make sure that that can be completed. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that smaller firms often sort of cheat a little bit in that people sometimes kind of know a little bit of the instruction manual, like they're more comfortable with, they're more familiar with it.
Because there's only one way to do things in a smaller firm.
And you don't have people that you just don't have as much variability around the input. Like, I mean, even inside of Quivr, if we're documenting a meeting that we have with for support for one of our client or for one of our users, you may name it one way and I name it the other way. Right. So like even on a small team, sometimes you get this variability. It's the same, it just magnifies as you get bigger. And so like, I do think that you're absolutely right. This is kind of one of the fundamental issues around managing a firm and managing a firm well and being able to be efficient with the management of that firm is that like, we have to kind of create, this is how we store data. And then we have to create, this is how we process work and data. And one of the things that I love most about Quivr is we've kind of created this philosophical foundation for how we approach that. And I think we do a really good job of this. And it's, I think, because we've spent so much time fighting this at either our own firms or at larger firms, or, we've seen this in terms of bad implementations. And so I feel like we've got a really good implementation of how we do this. But let's get into it a little bit because I think it needs a little bit of, illustration and discussion. Is that fair?
For sure. So I think we were talking about QCDs earlier. I think a QCD is a great example. Let's say an advisor, right, has a meeting, and that meeting with the client says we're gonna do a $10,000 QCD to XYZ 501c3 charitable organization. And in the meeting notes or in your AI note taker, it's gonna pick up that you want to do a QCD to that person. Well, think about all the data that's not captured there. Are we writing a check? Are we having Schwab or whomever your custodian is write a check? Or are we having the client? Does maybe the client have what we call like the charitable checkbook where they can just write the check? If we're the ones writing the check, do we know where we're sending it to? Do we know how we're sending it? Do you know when we're sending it? Do we know any of that information? If the client's writing the check, do we know when they're writing the check? Do we know if we have cash available? Do we know, right? All of these little things. So the advisor might say, well, it's pretty freaking obvious, right? We're writing a QCD. We're doing this. Like, what else do you know? But the back office is going to say, well, what do you want me to do now? Right? It's the old grocery store. If my wife tells me she's sick and she wants me to go get her medicine and I go to the store to get her medicine, what do I get her? I have no idea. No. Tell me the exact, I need this medicine at this amount. Tell me, like, just make it so I can just follow the instructions and get you exactly what you need, right? I want it to be super simple. So what we look at this with Quivr, right, for that QCD example is let's start with the paperwork. Let's start with what needs to happen. Let's go talk to not the advisor first, but let's talk to the operations or back office person who's executing this, right? The one actually doing the work. Look at the paperwork. Look at the process. What do we need? What 17 or 7 or 5 pieces of data do we absolutely need? And once we have that data, we can then build a project or something on the front end. I prefer projects, and we can just have a QCD project. And now think about it. The advisor wants to execute that QCD. They click the QCD button, and now a screen opens up, and they have to enter all of that information. It's like it's guiding them through the process. Who's writing the check, us or them? They are. Okay, based on that, you need to tell us these 3 things. Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? What do you need us to do? Or the opposite, we're sending the check. Okay, great. Then perfect. What account is it coming from? What is the timing for it? How do they want it addressed? Anything that you need, right? Your processing and procedures. You make these some required fields, and now the advisor in 15 seconds, is that fair? Enters all of this information. Upon save, you have a workflow. The workflow then gets kicked off automatically, right? Of course, you can do that. The workflow gets kicked off and then gets assigned to the CSA or whoever's responsible for processing the QCD. They get a notification, QCD time on their homepage. They click that open, they click on the project, and now boom, they have both things that they need. This is the QCD I'm processing. This is who I'm doing it for. This is how it's happening, all of that stuff. Then over on the right, they have their tasks, they have their workflow, they have the action, the work that actually needs to be done, guiding them through the process. How do I send a check in Schwab? I don't remember how to do that. Oh, perfect. You have the task steps embedded inside of your workflow that tells you exactly how to do that. You work through that process. Anything you want to add on that, Will? We have the data set in our projects. Then we use the workflow, then that guides you through the actual process of using the data set to make sure that the outcome is achieved.
Yeah, I think the important pieces to remember here are the project is the sort of structural wrapper. It's the saran wrap that you kind of, bind this particular bit of work up with. And so whether it's like an estate plan or a mortgage or tax prep or tax planning or whatever it is that you're working on, that's the data component. That's where we want to like go in there and customize that project and put the pieces of data that we need, whether it's text boxes, pick lists, check boxes, whatever it might be, get all that information into that project. Now we have something where we can really quickly track what is everything I need to understand how to do this. But then nowhere in that project, like when I'm looking at a mortgage project, there's nothing in there that tells me what I'm supposed to do next. It just doesn't exist, right? There's no instruction, there's no standard operating procedure. It's just raw data. And so then that's where that workflow comes in and really illustrates take this chunk of data, manipulate it in this particular way, complete this task. The next task fires up. Great. Now take the data that we just manipulated and send that back to the client or send that on to, a mortgage broker or whoever it might be that's kind of in that sequence of events. And so the project is again the wrapper. It's all the data, and you can kick off as one or as many workflows as you need to push that project forward. So, like I think the example that you and I have talked about in the past too is something as simple as like opening an account. Right? We all kind of know how to do that. Like if you're an advisor and you've been doing this for a while, you probably have some sense of what it takes to open an account. Great. But think of all the variability around that. Like when I'm building out workflows or attaching workflows to this bit of work, is it a brand new account? Do I want to attach a bank account to it? Do I want to include a transfer with it? Like these are all those individual workflows that have their own instruction sets of what else do I need? Where do I send this information? What do I do with this information? You just like keep adding workflows for each little step that you take with this particular thing. And the beauty of the project is now it's all sort of neatly wrapped up, organized. I understand what this is. I understand what I'm supposed to be doing with it. Like it's all in one place. I don't have to go hunt all over the place to find the tasks that relate. They're all right there on that project. To me, that's the power of like this philosophy that we have of basically data plus instruction set with an organizational overlay of, just sort of fundamentally how projects work.
And it's not a challenging concept in my opinion, because again, who's driving this? The doers are. You really want the doers, the back office to be driving this. And most advisors, I know, I know I've worked in bigger firms. I know there are a lot of advisors get the reputation, probably more of us than not. We get the reputation of just not being good with data, not being thorough, not being great with follow through, right? Our follow through tends to be low. Successful advisors are usually very personable, pretty good at sales, maybe not so good at documenting things. But if you can reverse engineer what you need and put it in front of the advisors, we're going to get you what you need because we have no other choice, right? We don't have a choice. And if you do that well, which again is not hard, just identify the couple of things you need for each of these key items you do over and over again, you should be able to maybe not eliminate, but come pretty dang close to eliminating inter-office communication on these simple requests, right? These are simple requests we're doing over and over and over again. We should be able to eliminate that communication.
Yeah, and I think this goes into the efficiency component. I think this goes into the work satisfaction component. I think that this goes into the client experience. I mean, as an advisor, I hated going back to a client and be like, hey, we submitted paperwork to TD. It didn't have this information. TD's requiring it. I need you to fill the paperwork. It's just such a hassle and it's not a great look. We want to make sure that we're, capturing the information that we need, that we're, able to push that process forward, that we look professional, that we look like we're organized. Like this is how you achieve all that, right?
You don't want to burn your relationship equity on administrative items. You want to use that for when you make a real mistake. Uh,
Right. Like, yeah, for sure.
and I know we're running
Yeah.
a little long, but I do want to take about 30 seconds, maybe a minute here, and talk about one other concept as well. There are situations where a workflow is just not going to be perfectly linear. the things that we're doing, right? QCDs are going to be processed more or less the exact same every single time. If we're writing the check, our process, or if we're sending the check, our process is going to be basically the same. Check for cash, check for this, the 7 things you have to do. But think about other things that are not going to work like that. My favorite example is an estate plan. You help a client get an estate plan, right? First thing you do is you identify that they need an estate plan, which that part you're probably going to do the same every time. Do you have an estate plan? If so, review it. Does it match their needs? But after that, it's never going to go the same. I promise you, it'll never. I've done this hundreds of times with clients. It's never gone the same. Clients need different things. They work at different paces, right? Some people get it notarized and signed right away. Some people take forever. Yeah, right? It just is what it is. It never goes the same. So I remember the first time that I created my estate planning workflow. I remember it like yesterday. I swear it was 20 steps. 20 steps. And I did exactly what I thought was the right thing to do at the time. I created that workflow as I was working through the process with a client. So I was working through the process with a client, like, oh, we need to do this, add a step. Okay, next is this, add a step. Next is this, add a step. And I built it out exactly like that client's process went. And the second time I took a client through an estate plan, that workflow was useless because nothing was the same. So when we look at the project and the workflow, right, the data set and the actions, the data set and the process that we actually use to complete the work, it's good to keep those separate because now if you look at my estate plan process, I have a project based on helping a client get a new estate plan or updating their estate plan. And there's a ton of fields in there. What's the route we're going? Attorney or, trust and will, wealth.com, something like that. What's the date that we identified the need? What's the date that the documents are drafted? All of these date fields. I have a rich text field for me to just take open notes on this, sent to the client at this, boom, 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 all of these things. And then I have I think it's only 3 steps, a 3-step workflow that I'm using. Because again, it's identify need, make sure documents are drafted, and then make sure documents are implemented, which that's it. So I have a very simple, very, very, very simple workflow that'll just bounce on and off my homepage as it's time for me to reach out with that client. But really, I'm doing all of the work in the project. So the workflow is more or less making sure that the project doesn't fall through the cracks. And now it doesn't matter if I have an adult, minor kids, super high net worth trust case, or a single 27-year-old. The workflow and the project are going to work for both of them.
And I think what's really cool about that too is it gives you the ability to modularize your workflows, where instead of having that like one 20-step workflow, you're down to like a 3 or 4-step workflow. And maybe you need a second one for that other case that is a little bit different. And then so you've got like one that's 3 steps, one that's 5 steps, like whatever it might be. But again, you can run multiple workflows off of a project. So it gives
Yeah.
you the functionality of being able to modularize, make workflows easier to administrate because they're smaller, they're less confusing. Maybe they're more linear in nature and you have less conditional logic in them. But like I think there's additional benefits beyond just sort of getting the work done that sort of get into one of our, mission statements, run your practice efficiently. This really helps with that.
Also, one-off tasks. We'd be ridiculous to assume that every single thing is going to be a workflow. Well, sometimes it's not a workflow. Maybe you have a client who has a really weird circumstance. They have a property in a different state and they need to do something with it. And you just need to create a one-off task of, we want to put a transfer on death deed on this property, but I don't know how to do it yet, but we're going to deal with it in 2 months when the estate plan is done. Well, boom, I don't need that to be a part of a workflow. I can just create a task associated to the project. And now every time I click on that project, I see that task right there. So I know, oh yeah, don't forget about this. Or, they asked me for some reason to, when they send me their estate documents, to make a copy of it and send it to their brother who lives in Arizona. I have gotten that request before. Am I going to say no? Absolutely not. It's going to cost me $7 to print and send this to them. I'm going to appease my client. So I put that task in the system, assign it to my mom and say, when this is done, we need to send a paper copy to their brother in Arizona because they don't have a scanner. They don't have a printer. Like, done. I'm never going to put that in a workflow because we're never going to do that again. But I like this. And the main reason I like this, as you can tell, right, is this is a start from the back. What do you want your outcome to be? And then it's infinitely customizable, right? What are your projects? What are your key functions associated with your workflows? And then you just get your advisors just following directions. And if you force your advisors to follow directions, your back office is going to be happy because the advisors aren't getting the back office what they need. Then you have probably a person problem and not a process problem, right? It's either a person problem or a process problem.
And that is such a big issue for I think a lot of larger firms is there is that expectation sometimes of, these advisors are just handing us, all sorts of like partial work where we're spending a ton of time just tracking down what they actually want. And then the advisor's in a meeting or they're on vacation. I can't get a hold of them. And it just compounds frustration in terms of a happy team, a
Right.
well-functioning team. And so, yeah, getting more of that into like, this is a neat little container, like the bento lunchbox where everything has its own little home. Like it makes it so much easier to kind of administrate that data and be like, hey, you send me this move money request. You left off these things. I can't process this. I'm just going to kick it back to you. But, try a little harder next time.
Absolutely. I love it. That's a wrap. Good stuff as always. If you're a Quivr user, remember, join us on Wednesdays, office hours. We can help you with similar items. If you're not a Quivr user, that is okay. Nobody is perfect and everybody does make mistakes. But remember, it's not too late. Come schedule a demo, hang out with me, hang out with Will, and see what Quivr can do for you and for your practice.